Drew Davies, welcome to Property Insights, mate.
Thank you. Good to be back.
You're Director of Place Estate Agents, Ascot, Queensland.
Ascot and Nunda, yeah, alongside my business partner, Patrick McKinnon.
Right, just give me a bit of a clue on Ascot and Nunda in terms of which parts of Brisbane is that in and what's the demographic, etc.
Yeah, Ascot's 5 Ks from the CBD. It's one of the more affluent suburbs in Brisbane. It would be one of the top 4 suburbs.
In terms of price?
In terms of price, median house price. Typically, it was a more mature family suburb, but that's certainly changed even in the last 2 years since we spoke last.
So what have we got now? Like young families?
More young
money,
families,
professionals,
entrepreneurs, yeah. A lot of people from Sydney and Melbourne, as we were hypothesising last time as to why that influx was there.
And it's happened?
It's definitely happened. But I think more than anything, the big trend that I've seen since we last spoke is that the local buyers, it's really spurred them into action, and they're the ones that have the biggest appetite for it. They're the ones competing for these big properties right now.
So and Nunda, tell me a little bit about that.
So
area.
Nunda is a company. So that's another office that we've made the purchase.
No, but what's the area like?
It's a young families, up and coming area, a little bit further out. Median sales
North,
price.
south, east, west.
North.
So it's on that new road. The new road that goes up to Moreton Bay, like that big freeway.
So it's as you continue out Sandgate Road.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to do with these offices is build that northern corridor.
Right.
So we can sell up and down.
The northern corridor being going all the way up to where I just said, like
up to Redcliffe, Newport,
right, past Redcliffe, etc. Yeah.
Correct.
So I just want. So by the way, I want to check. You still hold the record for the most expensive 1-bedroom apartment ever sold?
I think I'll hang my hat on that for a few years
seriously,
to come. I think, yeah.
And that number, just remind me, what was that number? It was 2.65, 2.625.
2.625. That was it for a 1-bedroom. Yeah.
Per mate, like that was, which part of Queensland is it, or Brisbane was that?
That was in Riparian Plaza, which was Harry Seidler designed building, beautiful building in the CBD.
Okay, so it's probably unlikely to be repeated unless there's another 1-bedroom comes up for sale.
Until that one sells again in a few years, I don't think that's going to be beaten in a while.
Just help me out here. So that northern corridor, so explain what that means. Because, like we've got people here listening from all parts of Australia, and maybe thinking about investing in Queensland. We've got Queenslanders thinking about investing in Queensland as well. What is the Northern Corridor? Why is it such a thing these days?
Look, I'm biased, right? Because
give me a bias. I'm happy.
Yeah, I like the north side of Brisbane, and there's definitely that.
Why?
I like the north side of Brisbane because of ease of access to everywhere. It's right close to the airport.
What does everywhere include?
So Ascot sits right between the airport and the CBD.
Yep. As
you travel north, you get to Noosa, which is basically, Queensland's version of Aspen, where everyone goes every second, weekend they get.
In Brisbane? Or
in Brisbane.
Yep.
Well, all over Australia, obviously, but Brisbane especially.
Right. So Brisbane people love to be, because they don't have a beach there in Brisbane, so Brisbane people love to go north to Noosa if they want to go for the weekend for
Sunshine Coast,
beach.
Gold Coast.
Yeah. And obviously it's a bit warmer up there too, I guess, relatively speaking. Certainly. So the Northern Corridor gets it in there pretty quickly. They're in an hour or so.
It does. Everything's relatively quickly when you live on the north side. People on the south side are going to hate me for saying this. I still sell property on the south side. It's where our offices are. We are looking to acquire a third office, and that will be further out on the north side as well. It just allows us the ability to sell people out and in.
Right. So, and then what? Okay, it's close to someone like Noosa, close to the airport, obviously, because the airport's on the north side of the city. But it's closer to the city. It's very close to the city.
Everything's
airport.
Close to the city in Brisbane, Mark.
It's close.
That's why Brisbane's the greatest city.
So I'm looking at the amenities. So we've got airport, somewhere like Noosa, so a destination for weekends and holidays and all that sort of stuff. What else is on the north side that's important?
Look, everything revolves around the river in Brisbane.
Yep.
So you've got your river walks, your restaurants, your bars, your cafes. It's much more of a quieter lifestyle than you'll find here in Sydney, and everything's so accessible. You're not travelling half an hour, 40 minutes to get anywhere. Everything's 5, 10, 15 minutes. Everything is within driving distance. There's no traffic. Well, there's little traffic. People complain about it at the moment, but not people who are coming from Melbourne and Sydney.
It's not relative to the traffic we have here in Sydney.
Correct.
And then the Northern Corridor is a corridor. So where does it start and end? Obviously, it starts in Brisbane.
Yeah,
Where
look,
does it
that's
end?
up for debate. There are people who sell in the inner west or out east, but I think if you drew a line between sort of Ascot and Redcliffe, which is the Bay Area, that's pretty much where we head. And a lot of these people sell up and down within that corridor. And what I mean by that is they may move from Wavell Heights to Ascot, or they may downsize in the other way from Ascot to Wavell Heights and out further or up to the coast.
So Redcliffe now has his own rugby league team, of course.
It does.
The Dolphins.
It does.
And,
I've changed.
And it's a great jersey.
I'm now a Dolphin supporter.
Are you?
Yeah, well, I was a Warriors supporter.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking for a way out for many years, but I refused to go to the Broncos. Don't hate me for saying that. I
don't hate you.
No, all my clients. Yeah, all of my clients. But the minute the Dolphins came up, I thought, oh, you beauty, this is my time to jump ship. And then I jumped ship and the Warriors do well. So Murphy's Law.
And one of Arthur Beeson's clubs, Redcliffe's, of course.
Correct.
And I love the colour of the jersey. Jersey's so good on television.
great.
It's a great jersey for TV. It's
a great team.
And they're doing well. So Redcliffe, but what about beyond Redcliffe? So and what's important here is I seem to remember I was up there and I remember I had to drive to Moreton Bay quite a lot because we were filming a show up there and had to go to, I can't remember the name of the area in Moreton Bay, one of the areas up there, and the houses up there at the time, this is a few years ago, about 6-7 years ago, and the houses were like $500,000-$600,000 for a house. And people were sort of saying to me, like, it's not such a great area. Now those houses are like 1.2, 1.3. And of course, I should have bought. I was going to, but I just, came back to Sydney and forgot all about it. And I just got caught up in my day-to-day stuff and just didn't do anything about it. But there was a new road that was being built, which is annoying to me because I had to drive from Brisbane every day to get there and the traffic was just a nightmare. Have you got good transport corridors from North Brisbane and further north now?
We do. I mean, we're always going to complain about traffic, right? But the short answer is yes, I believe we do. I think the transport situation in Brisbane is really good, right throughout. And
how important is that in terms of buyers? So when buyers are looking at, do they actually think about this stuff? They say, listen, there's a highway corridor, or a highway to the corridor.
Not so much a highway corridor, but it's certainly a consideration. Right. It's an education process, especially for those buyers from Melbourne or Sydney who just see the distance from the CBD and assume there will be
a 2-hour trip,
a lengthy commute, and it's just not the case. So local buyers understand sometimes there's an education process with a Melbourne or Sydney buyer to help them understand that, hey, they can purchase in these, it's still the inner ring of Brisbane.
Yeah. So and in terms of closer to Brisbane, but on the north side and either side, is it mostly apartments or houses we're talking about?
Houses is my main, core area of business. But of course, we have agents in both of our offices that sell a ton of apartments.
So what's doing best now, though? Is it?
Apartments have just gone boom in Brisbane.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why is that? In Brisbane, you mean within the close part of the river?
Yeah, in Clayfield, Hamilton, Ascot.
Right.
We consider the one and the same where our office is based.
What's causing that? What's driving that?
A younger demographic of buyer just looking to get into the market is what I'm seeing. I can't comment on the whole of the market.
Affordability or
affordability, I think.
Or is it younger demographic prefer the lock-up and the view or whatever it is that they get?
Look, I think it's affordability. Apartments are not my key market, but from what I'm seeing, it's affordability.
Right. So is there much of a difference though between the price of a, say, 2-bedroom house in a good building in Hamilton, maybe with a bit of view, relative to, say, a 3-bedroom house in the same area? Is there much of a price difference?
Yeah, there is. The median house price across these suburbs really sits around that 2.5-3 million.
Right.
Wow. And sometimes that's not getting. I feel horrible saying it, but it's not getting you anything.
Flash.
It's nothing flash.
Yep.
So you're certainly not getting a view in most instances for that price. Whereas an apartment, you'll certainly get a view, especially if you're willing to make compromises in an older building. You'll get all the bells and whistles for something in that price range or much lower.
And that house that you're talking about for that average price at 2.5 mil.
Yep.
Is that a so-called renovator's dream? Is it like it's got a crappy
kitchen? It could be if it was on an A-grade street. It absolutely. I mean, you could. I sold a property at the end of start of this year for 8.3 million. That house is being knocked down.
Wow.
So that was purely for the land value, 8.3 million.
Big block of land though.
Big block of dirt. Circa 1,000 square meters.
So it's a 1/4 acre block. Old school 1/4 acre block.
Yeah.
But it also has to be in a good street.
Has to be in a good street. I mean, 2.5 million might get you a fancy new build home in Wavell Heights, but you're going out another 8 kilometres to get there.
Right.
Whereas in Ascot, 2.5 million, you're making some pretty severe compromises in most instances.
So you're looking at is the compromise, generally speaking, the size of the land?
Could be the size of the land, could be the condition of the house. A lot of these homes you can't knock down if they're pre-war. So.
Oh, really?
Correct.
So they've got some sort of
character
conservation
overlay. Or it may even be heritage. So those homes you have to work within what you're given.
Oh, wow. So you got constraints as to how you can
There
fix
are
it up.
definite constraints. And because Ascot's, one of the older suburbs in Brisbane, there's not a lot of space to come across a home that can be knocked down or a vacant piece of land. So this drives the values up as well.
So if I said to you, look, here's a spare 10 large, I don't want you to borrow any money, but I want you to go and buy.
What interest rate are you giving me, Mark?
No, free. I'm not going to charge you any rate. I'm just going to say, mate, just spend the money well, because I want to put my super into Brisbane. Where and what would you buy?
Personally, I'd buy high-end in Ascot or Hamilton, only because we're seeing such a huge increase in demand for that top end of town.
And that's the $8 million deal?
8 million. There was a 9.7 million I did at the end of last year, which was an Ascot home. There is 7.8 for another tennis court home. We're having multiple offers on these homes. Wind back the clock 5 years, you were struggling to find that buyer.
So where are these buyers coming from with all this cash?
Like I said, last time I was here, we were hypothesising, what was it driving the migration to Brisbane, from Melbourne and Sydney? Was it lifestyle, health, affordability? And I think it was all three of those for the interstate buyers. But what it's really done is spur those local buyers into action.
But where are they getting the dough from? I mean, if that's the top of the market, like it probably is, they're not. It's not like they're selling something for 30 million and downsizing to 8 or 9 million.
Correct.
They're upgrading to 8 or 9 million. It's not like that's not an amount of money you can borrow. You're not going to go to your Westpac bank and say, look, can you lend me 8 million?
Yep.
You're not going to get 90% LVR or even 70% LVR or something like that. Where are these people getting their money from?
I think with the boom in property that's come in Brisbane, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a big, increase in the entrepreneurial scene in Brisbane altogether. And that's been there for quite a while. We all know that. But it's been on the increase for, especially since we last spoke 2 years. So there's a lot of young business owners, a lot of businesses that have done really well post-COVID. And of course, the interstate buyers that moved up pre-COVID as well.
Yeah. So in migration terms, Queensland is still doing very well relative to the rest of Australia in terms of growth. And I'm not talking about from overseas. I'm talking about most of the overseas people come to Sydney and Melbourne. They get established, then they think about migrating or leaving, going to somewhere like Queensland because they want to get away from traffic, get better weather, etc. But generally speaking, the migration of people who have already been established in Australia is generally speaking going north. It's going to Queensland. So it's going particularly out of Melbourne, but to some extent out of Sydney. And I guess what's happening is they're selling their expensive places here in Sydney, Melbourne. They're selling for 12, 15 million. And then they're going up there and they say, well, I'll bank 2, but I'll buy with 8, and I want that property, and I'll pay whatever I have to pay for it because there's only one of them. There's only one Ascot.
It's only one Ascot,
and no one's going to recreate another one somewhere else because Ascot's not only about the size of the land, the size of the properties, but Ascot's where it's located, what it's close to. So it's what the infrastructure that's close to that's really valuable to people. It's about lifestyle at the end of the day.
It is.
And people pay for it because I often wonder, someone said to me the other day that houses in Mossman, just a plain Federation home on maybe 1,000 square meters, nice inside, clean, but nothing fancy. It sells for $6 million. And I was like, well, who are these buyers? Because they're not going to borrow 3; they're going to borrow maybe 1 or 2. Where are they getting the 4 from? And it turns out that they're people who had a bigger house somewhere else in Sydney or Melbourne, or wealthy migrants coming here. So a lot of wealthy migrants coming into Sydney buying these properties. In a couple of years, they're going to say, well, it's a bit crowded here. The kids are growing up. They're going to school. Why don't we move to Queensland where the weather's better, generally speaking? And Brisbane's got a lot of good stuff to offer now, lifestyle-wise. And we don't really care about the beach so much. A lot of these people don't get to the beach. They're the sort of people who are going to end up in Brisbane. And my thesis still is Queensland's going to still keep kicking on hard by virtue of wealthy migration into Queensland, established migration into Queensland, for all the reasons everyone keeps talking about. It's not just weather, it's everything else is going on up there, access, lifestyle. You don't have 5.5 million people living in one city like we do here in Sydney. There's probably a couple of million living in Brisbane, but still it's not like hectic in terms of traffic and stuff like that.
It's easy living.
Easy living. What would you say to someone then who's maybe here in Sydney and they're thinking about building a bit of a portfolio for their future for 20 years from now, what would you say to them? They've got a small amount of money to invest, and they can borrow some. They can probably spend up to 1.5. Where would you suggest, given your franchises, where would you suggest that they buy?
That's a conversation I have nearly daily.
Right.
So I'm well versed in what I would recommend, and that would be your typical 600 block with a post-war home that in future you can knock down in those inner suburbs that are out a little bit further. Nunda, Wavell Heights, Kedron, if you go west into, your Ashgroves and places like that.
Kedron, is that near, correct me, I'm thinking of Kenmore. It's not out.
No, Kenmore's out west.
Yeah.
Little.
Yeah. Kedron's much closer in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Much closer in. So these homes will get you a return as they stand. The rental market's very tight in Brisbane.
Is it?
Very tight.
So you get a reasonable rent for it?
You'll get a reasonable rent. Some of the rents there's upward pressure on rents in a big way.
Do you have the same problem in Brisbane, for example, that everyone else is always complaining about not enough production of new property?
Oh, I think that's Australia-wide. The housing shortage is very real. I read a stat the other day, and it said for every 50 construction trades that are retiring, there's 7 apprentices coming through their first year.
Yeah, so we've got a major problem.
Well, we've got a major problem that's still coming as well, and I'm yet to see some sort of strategic plan from the government to explain our way out of it. Whether that's coming or not. So I think, the government could be doing more to help these developers provide new product, especially at that lower to mid-tier. And
just help me out here. In terms of stamp duty, what's stamp duty in Queensland? What's it range from? Forget about the exemptions for first-home buyers and all that sort of stuff, but generally speaking, if I buy a property in Queensland, am I going to be paying 3% stamp duty for 5%?
Yeah, you pay $1 million or you pay 1.3, you're going to be paying, what was it? I'm working off memory here, I think I pay 58.
58,000.
Yeah.
So it's sort of that's about 4%. So okay. So and what about land tax? I mean, let's say I got 2 properties. I got one that I live in.
Yep.
Principal place residence. You get an exemption for that.
Yes, for your principal place.
Yep. And then the second property. What have you guys? Because I know in Victoria they've just changed the land tax threshold of $50,000. So if your second property, where it's not your principal place of residence. If your second property is worth more than 50, the land part of it is worth more than $50,000, which is pretty much everything.
Yeah.
You start paying land tax.
I get asked this question all the time, and I refer it straight to the accountant. I'm going through it myself at the moment, and my accountant's basically structuring it 3 different ways. He's given me different options, so that's the question I defer every time.
So, but would you suggest? But you're not hearing it's worse than everybody else, because I'm hearing Victoria's worse than everybody else.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Because and I know people who say, well, I'll buy one property in Sydney. I'll buy one property in Victoria, Melbourne perhaps, and I'll buy one property in Adelaide, and I'll buy one property in Brisbane, instead of buying 4 properties in Sydney. And the reason they're doing that is so they only get they have less land tax overall, because land tax accumulates on values, and people are sort of doing it to avoid land tax. And by the way, land tax is, if it's 4 or 5% per annum, it takes a big chunk out of your rents.
Big chunk. Then you got your management fee,
and you got management fee and everything else. So it's worth thinking about. So planning these things is quite important. Can I ask you one more question before I close off here? Do you guys interact with buyers agents?
In a very large way.
Right.
In a very large way. On a daily basis.
Oh, really?
A huge part of our business.
So if you've got a property for sale or for auction or whatever process it is, how often would you get contacted by the buyer's agent, or are they just contacting you for things you can't sell?
Every single time we will contact a range of buyer's agents.
You will contact?
We will reach out. Right. They're constantly reaching out to us. The good ones know what they're doing. They're constantly reaching out, providing briefs that their buyers have that are on their books. But on the flip side of that, when we've got a property and we may be, for instance, at the moment, we've just come off the back of Easter school holidays. There's a period there where it's historically extremely quiet.
Yeah.
So stock on market is very low. It's been very tightly held. However, I am sitting on a bunch of listing agreements where I have committed sellers coming to market. Now, it would be silly of me to sit there doing nothing with these properties until I list them. So, of course, all of these buyers agents are getting sent emails describing what I have coming on board to ask them if they want to get through the property beforehand. It's a fine line. You don't want to devalue the launch of that property online by showing it repeatedly, but you also want to get it in front of the right buyer's agents with the right clients.
So do you think it's a good idea for buyers in Sydney, for example, to go through a buyer's agent who then has relationships with people like you?
Absolutely. I use a buyer's agent.
You personally use
I
one?
personally use a buyer's
Really?
agent. Yeah,
Wow.
well, I don't have time. Not only do I
Yeah.
not have time, and it's all fair and well for me to sit here and say, hey, Mr. Sydney buyer, hey, Mr. Melbourne buyer, I've got all the great properties.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is I can show them a range of off-market properties. But there are also other agents out there that are great, that have their own off-market properties.
Yeah.
I don't know what they have off-market. Whereas a buyer's agent, if they're a good buyer's agent, will foster those relationships with all of the best agents and be able to put them all on their plate. So it just cuts to the chase a lot quicker. So I think it's worth it for that.
Off-market properties mean properties are not
Not
currently
yet
on the market for sale.
Yeah, and typically that's where a buyer's agent will add a lot of value.
Right.
Off-market, coming to market.
So that individual will ring you, Drew, and say, mate, I've got a buyer here. He's going to spend 2 or 3 million. He wants to buy an Ascot or whatever. And what have you got?
Correct.
Yeah. And then you by the way, the vendor doesn't have to sell. But if that hits the vendor's number, the deal's done.
Yeah.
It's clean.
Yeah, exactly. So quite often it's not just about the price. People think, don't deal with buyer's agents. They're just trying to screw you on price. Of course, they're after fair market value for their buyer. But it's more often than not finding the right property for their buyer. And when they do find the right property, of course, they'll pay the right money.
Yeah,
it's just giving them the opportunity one-on-one is where the value comes in before they have to compete for it.
I actually heard something very interesting about this just again recently, where an agent told me here in Sydney that he has buyers who have specific instructions as to what they want to buy, and when that property becomes available, he'll contact them if he's got that property. But when those properties become available, those buyers will just make an offer just to take it off the market.
So I have that brief out with the buyer's agent myself right now.
Right.
That exact
Find me
same
the right property, and I'll pay more than everybody else. I'll pay what it is to get the property.
because I understand what I'm looking for does not come around every day. So when it does, I want to know about it,
Otherwise, you're going to miss out.
and I'll highly likely offer on it straight away. And I'm not looking to steal it. I just want the property that I want.
Yeah. And you want to live where you want to live. Or
Correct.
you want to own where you want to own.
Correct.
Drew Davies, thanks very much. Good to see you again, mate.
My pleasure.
Brisbane's still on fire. Nothing's changed.
Still on fire, mate. Thank you.